going. Thank you everybody for being here.
All right, folks, when you guys have questions today, you can drop them in the chat. That's usually the easiest way for us to see everything. I'll be monitoring all of that as we go through and letting the guys just kind of run the show. And I'll be popping back in to ask them your questions as they come up and to help guide these guys along and not let them, go on for the next 7 hours, which they totally could. And you probably would like it, but we all have places to be today. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Josh and Craig, and you guys can kind of kick everything off here, and I'll turn my screen off now.
Cool. All right. You want to lead, Josh? Or are you gonna?
I'm trying to see where we should start here. Do we have the first question to go off of here?
Well, I think while you guys are getting everybody warmed up and ready to ask their questions, it takes a minute to type them in. Why don't you guys just start shooting the breeze like you always do, talking about what you've been up to with Telly lately.
Yeah, no, this has been fun. Craig and I actually have been hanging out a lot lately, and it's been a lot of fun chopping it up. And for the people that have probably known us through various stuff over the years, it may seem like an unlikely pair that we're, but I think that what's been really fun is just Craig and I met probably almost over 15 years ago. I knew you before you knew me, type of thing. So it's been fun getting to know each other.
You knew of me, and then I remember it was at a Pow Mau, at one of our annual ski gear tests at Powder Mountain. And I was aware of you, I think because of the loyalty video.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And maybe another one, I'm not totally certain, right? And Howie was like, well, I think you should meet Josh. I think you two would get along. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, but, so we were in some condo, and I remember I walked downstairs and you were there, and I don't remember exactly how the introduction began, but I do know that pretty soon we were talking, and it was pretty animated, and there was a lot less disagreement than I expected. I just figured two different generations, and this guy's gonna be well, I'll just repeat the obvious. I mean, this has always been where we've come from. You've always been about the Telemark turn, okay? And I admit that I love the Telemark turn, but I was always about earning your turns, and I didn't care how you turn. But the more I've done this, and that doesn't mean that I don't, if someone prefers to alpine ski or snowboard, that's their choice. That's awesome, right? And if we're on the slope together, we're bros, we're gonna have fun together, and I'm not gonna be disparaging that. That's silly, okay? We're all enjoying sliding on snow. But I did share your passion that Telly was the ultimate. So I think just that little nugget right there has allowed us to get along for many years. And actually, and there's other things that I remember you proposed early on, and I was just like, I hear what you're saying, but you're cuckoo. And that one thing that you were adamant about is that we need a telemark industry. And when you explained it, I was just like, yes, we need that, but come on, let's get real. That is not going to happen. But on the other hand, you've been single-minded about that. And here we are pushing the envelope of that right here, right now, doing something that no one else in the outdoor industry has ever done that I'm aware of. I mean, maybe they have, okay? But as far as I know, no one has said, hey, we have this ability to have a public meeting and share what's going on, and anybody in the world can log in and share. Like, whoa. And I know that technology existed before, but the way circumstances have unfolded in the past year, everyone has become familiar and utilized that capability. So why not? Why don't we use it? Okay, which we're doing, which is awesome.
Yeah, no, and it's been really great getting to know you over the years, and I agree. It's so cool, and thank you for everybody that's, in here and asking questions, and I'm super excited to get into that, and I think yeah, this is great to have Craig, and I want to thank him for being here too, because this is like a full circle bringing him on board with this thing, and something that if you guys, because you are subscribers, if you haven't read the piece that Susie Sutphin wrote that we put up a couple weeks ago, and the podcast that we had her on, she deserves all the credit for coming up with this idea for Telemark Skier Magazine, literally like in 1999, and then kind of hammered on Craig to publish a magazine. And, I've told Craig this a million times, but if it wasn't for him, when people like Susie, I wouldn't even be here, because they kind of gave this platform when I was a young guy, and I thought it was the coolest thing. And I'm really hoping that, stuff like this is going to help us lead into that, and also give more access to you guys to tell us what's going on and feed us good information. Because sometimes it gets, all this industry talk. The bad part is there's not a telemark industry, as it were. The good part is the people that are in the larger snow industry, we're pretty well connected to, but this gives us a much better opportunity to answer you guys' questions and help out. So.
Okay, so we got a bunch of questions here. Let me see.
Did you catch that one from Roger Abrams? He's new to Telly. I thought that was a pretty neat one.
Let's see. Roger Abrams. Let's see.
I saw this. It's I'm new to Telly, currently ski 75 millimeter, but I'm interested in TTS. Any recommendations or info? Also, is TTS significantly better than TTS? I don't know what that means, but I'm new to Telly and currently skiing 75, but interested in TTS. Craig, I'm going to hand this one to you, because you've literally been funny side story. When TTS came out, which is, for those of you that don't know, Telemark, it's Telemark Tech System, and was created by this guy, Mark Langell, that's from Salt Lake City. Craig showed me this thing at a trade show in 2011, because I remember it was the year that the Rotafella Freedom came out, and you said, this is the future. And I said, no way.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, what do you think, Craig? 75, new to Telly, what, going to TTS?
Well, so here's the thing. But I'll give a little bit of a history of the motivation for Mark Langell. So Mark was distributing ski trap skis, and he was kind of he was following the skimo circuit. All right. But he was a telemarker. And so he was like, man, it would be so cool if we could just have a Dynafit style tow and a cable. And at the time, yes, NTN boots, the TX, the old orange TX at the time, did have tech inserts, but he realized, well, for ski mountaineering, that's way too heavy boot. There's no way to win with that. Just, it's not possible. Okay. You have to be in the same weight range to even stand a chance. And you still have to be a mutant in terms of being super fit and that sort of thing. But his point was to be able to take an old F1 and use that with a telemark binding to
F1,
yeah,
F1's a boot,
and
just so
hopefully
they know.
win. Right. So he developed it, and I remember thinking the same sort of thing myself, and I was just like, oh, there's no way that'll work. I mean, the pins are just not strong enough. It just can't do it. Right. Well, Mark didn't stop with his analysis. He cobbled a few things together and put it on a ski and went out and tested. And it's like, dang, it worked. So then he filed a patent, and then he sent me a prototype. And when I got it, I'm looking at it going, well, I mean, okay, I don't think there's no way this will hold, right? So I take it out in the field and I step into the 2 pins and I just instinctively lock them out because I figure there's no way that that'll hold. And I put on the cable and I went and skied it and it held. And it was really active, way more than I expected. In fact, in some ways it was too active. Okay, but the as a beta, it worked. And so did it need an adjustment where the pivot location was for the cable? Absolutely. Did I need to go back and change it? Absolutely. Were the springs that he sent long enough for me to be able to use it without limiting out? No. but the concept was solid. So that began things. And I know a lot of people, DNFIT had the same problem when they were first introduced. I remember seeing the first one in 1991. And I remember I'd heard about it. I remember I saw some sketches of it from a friend in Europe, and he was telling me, oh, this is the future. All those plate bindings for alpine touring, they're not going to last. This is the future. And I'm looking at it going, there's no way. There's not enough there to hold me in. But as we now know, it's proven there's over 1 million users of DNFIT style bindings. So it's proven that it works. And then in terms of TTS, the only thing that I think Mark missed, and it's because of where he put the pivot location in his first prototype, he put it too far forward. And he thought, well, there's no way this will work if it's connected to the second heel. It just won't do anything. Okay. He was wrong. Because Pierre Moyad, who's the inventor of the Meijo and started the M equipment for that, looked at it and said, you know what? This is a really cool concept, but it would be better if it were attached at the second heel. And it would be better if it were step in. And Pierre did all the computation analysis to come up with that. And it works. So here's the thing. TTS compared to 75 millimeter is more active when it connects at the real heel. And I still don't think that we have a truly optimized system available from anybody. Belay is doing better, okay, because they offer long springs that are soft. And Ches is here as one of the folks who's listening. And I know I worked with him, and we took Lingel's basic cable block, and we moved it to a slightly different non-recommended position. It was a little bit further back, but he used a long spring with soft long springs, and he put it in a very aggressive rear cable pivot location, which, Ches, you can correct me, but I believe it was something like 75 or 80 millimeters. It was really aggro, and if those were not soft springs, it'd be way too much for the average person. Way too much, just completely out of line. But with soft springs and a rear active pivot location, it actually engages smooth and steady and holds solid. And the other thing about TTS or any tech-toe binding is it's just more efficient in the backcountry, because when you're touring, you're not lifting the binding. All you're doing is lifting your boot, okay? The Outlaw, I think, is a great binding. A lot of people disparage it because it's heavy. Compared to what, right? Compared to a Duke? No. Compared to a BMF? Absolutely not, okay? Compared to a Switchback? Yes, okay? But honestly, the Outlaw is not that heavy. I think it's 3 pounds per pair, so it's a pound and a half per foot. And so when you're touring in the Outlaw, you're lifting your boot and you're lifting 1.5 pounds. But the reality is it's rotational lifting. It's not like a deadlift. And I mean, I toured for 5 days in the Sierra and I never felt like, oh my God, this Outlaw is so heavy. No, it was a great binding. Okay. It's just that TTS is more efficient for the touring and there's fewer pieces for snow to pack in. So it's less prone to packing with snow, which the Meijo is known for, the Lynx less so, but like last weekend, I had some pretty serious boot jack with my Lynx, and it was the conditions, but nonetheless, I was surprised. Okay, so that's the main advantage of TTS is it's better for touring, and then it's pretty darn active, and so you got to figure out how to dial that back to what your personal preference is for how much tension you want when you lift your heel.
I like it. I'm going to hop into this next one. Dan, what can you tell us about the new Freeheel Life ski line? What are the dimensions? And then are they manufactured specifically for Telemark? Super good. I'm not going to go too deep because we just recorded a podcast with my good friend Todd Harilla, who's the ski maker that we've worked with in the past. A lot of people don't realize that we've actually we made skis 2 different times in the last 6 years, but it just wasn't, the timing just wasn't right. And we did them all with Todd. So we've kind of had this long going relationship, but the Protector 105 and the Protector 95 are these 2 skis that we're going to be putting out. And we just did an hour-long podcast that's coming out this coming Monday. And we're going to break down all of the details of construction, and what's in them, how the layup is. The coolest part about that is we're actually going to be making, we're working with Todd for some portions of the process, mostly the CNC for the cores and the press, but everything else is here at Freeheel Life. So when we made the prototype skis, I actually made the cores myself. I glued up the wood. I cut all the wood into pieces and did that. But listen to the podcast that's coming Monday, 95 underfoot and a 105 underfoot. And then you can get the rest of the details. Dostie actually got to ski on the 105 version that we're going to be going with. And I think we nailed it. We're super psyched, but I'm stoked for you guys to get on, and we'll have some more information on that because we're going to do a pre-order for them. So you guys are the first to hear about it.
Yeah, I mean, I skied on the 105. It was not good conditions for a 105 with a pair of soft TX boots. But aside from that, it held well and it was responsive. When I could find soft snow, it was a great ski. And I mean, Josh and I were talking on the lift. He goes, "Oh, you would totally like the 95." And I was like, "I would totally like the 95." So it had a good flex. And the conditions we were in at the time at Alta, it was pretty firm snow in most spots. I mean, we had to go to east-facing slopes to get anything marginally soft to really be able to feel how good that ski could be. But we did, and in that case, great.
Yeah. So super excited to share more with you all about that. It's going to be pretty awesome. I was going to say something, but I spaced it.
All right. So there's an interesting question here. Can one use a non-bellowed boot to telly, like an AT boot? So I would say categorically no, because one of the keys to the Telemark turn, I think we can all agree on this, is being able to flex the boot and feel and apply pressure to the rear ski through the ball of your foot, through the metatarsals. So if you have a non-bellowed AT boot, you really can't do that. However, I saw on the Backcountry Talk forum that somebody took the time to basically cut out the bellows on an AT boot, just use duct tape to cover it. And they were like, man, this thing telly's great, which, okay, maybe it does. All right. I haven't done that. They cut it so that it could flex. Awesome. The other thing is, I remember years and years ago,
Telemark boot, right?
yeah, Ned Ryerson. I went out on a ski tour with Paul Raymer and Ned Ryerson. Ned has been teaching kids to telly in Aspen for decades. And this was back in the 90s. And so we're out there, and I'd switched to telly. So I was kind of bummed that I had to lock my heels for the tour. But Ned was like, no, you can telly with Raymers, with a plate binding, with a stiff alpine boot. I was like, are you kidding? How do you do that? He's like, well, it's all how you weight your upper body so that you can get weight on your rear foot. Now, was I able to drive the rear ski through my metatarsals? No. But was I able to drive adequate power to the rear ski just through the toe? Yes. So, I don't recommend it for telly. All right. The real point of it was that a lot of it had to do with my balance. And so Ned came up with a great trick for getting my balance right. So even if I couldn't get the weight on the ball of my foot, I could at least get weight on my rear ski and kind of do a pseudo telly. Now, it's not as powerful as being able to flex the boot, but it wasn't as bad as just trolling for snow snakes back there. So just for what that's worth.
Pseudo telly, huh?
Yeah.
We're gonna have to burn through these questions faster.
Well, I want to jump in there because we've got a great one from the forum. We got a couple of great ones from the forum that folks asked ahead of time, and I want to make sure I drop this one in at least. So from Mo Pow on the forum, regarding the boot discussion, as a telly skier in North America, it feels like the boot manufacturers are totally disconnected from their Telemark customers, aka us. When we discuss what we'd like to see in future boots, it feels like we're speaking into a void. Does it feel differently to the retailers and or industry insiders? Thanks, Dave Mopow.
Can I start this one?
You lead. I mean, there's too much I might say.
Yeah. This is a he covered that. It's a good question, and it covers a lot of ground. I think starting with the retail perspective, this honestly, the people in here, whoever watches this down the road, I think this is the most important thing to understand. Craig and I were joking about creating, when I first pitched this idea of like, hey, we got to make our own industry. A lot of it, and if you listen to the podcast at all, I think it was like episode number 2 or something. I talked about Telemark's not dead. Telemark retail is dead. Part of the issue we're having with Telemark skiing in general is the method of how we bought and sold Telemark gear has changed tremendously. In Craig's era, I mean, you're still here, but in your era, yeah. I mean, the 80s and 90s, early 2000s, you had backcountry shops. And because people were accessing the backcountry, a lot to things that people like Craig were doing with Couloir magazine, and, people were earning their turns. And this was a thing. You bought telly gear through a backcountry shop. It doesn't really, so people get really angry when they think, oh, well, my local backcountry shop doesn't sell telly gear anymore. You kind of can't blame them, right? Because there's this huge boom. They've only got so much shelf space and money to spend. And they started buying AT boots. And they weren't Telemark shops, even though if you identified as a Telemark skier, that's where you went. And that's the case in Salt Lake And so that's the first thing I'd say is retailers, as much as you think they have a voice, the retailers don't have a whole lot of sense of what is going on a lot of times. And I'm talking from experience, because when I was making Telemark movies, I'd show them in a lot of these retail spaces, and you could see through the early 2000s, you had very solid people inside of these shops that were actual Telemark skiers. And most of them were backcountry skiers using Telemark equipment to get to the backcountry, but it's slowly faded out. And I'm sure a lot of you out there probably have had this experience where you walk into a backcountry shop or an outdoor shop, and you're like, I want to get into Telemark. And they're like, this is why, and there's kind of this wall. And I know that because all of you end up at Freeheel Life shop, which is awesome for us, but that's the short of it. Not to go too deep on the retail, is retailers in general, if they are going to carry a new boot, are probably thinking a backcountry boot. Now, as far as people not listening, and I'm going to kind of parlay another question into this whole thing, because somebody asked what the status of Crispy was. And I think we tend to pick on Scarpa a lot, because Scarpa is like, especially if you're in North America, that's the boot. I mean, it's like 98% of the market or 99% of the market. You don't see a lot of Crispy. You don't see a lot of Scott. So just to kind of give a general overview, is of all the 3 boot manufacturers that are available, we talk to them the most. It's Scarpa, and they're very receptive, and there's ongoing conversations, and you've all heard about, new stuff coming out. And I think a lot of it's deciphering what we need. And sometimes the dark corners of the internet scream for a backcountry boot. And I think I think this guy's correct in saying it feels like it just kind of falls into the ether and we don't know what happens. But the large majority, when you say backcountry, it might mean different things to certain people. In Europe, there's alpine touring, and there's more randonnée, super lightweight stuff, and then there's sort of like middle of the ground stuff, more like maybe RTX Pros, or along those lines of boots. So there's not enough retailers to have an opinion. That's my take on it, because most of them, unfortunately, and this isn't just because I own a shop either, is unfortunately they're not as educated as they could be on a lot of the needs of telemarketers, because there's a lot of people that don't backcountry ski that telemark. So that's one problem. And then I just think it's slow moving, because you do have some influence from Europe because the boot makers are there. And like I said, I was going to bring Crispy, and someone said, what's the status of Crispy? I mean, literally, like, Craig and I have been in this a long time. And when you talk about Crispy or Scott, I mean, I've been doing this in some capacity for 20 years. Craig's been doing it probably since the dinosaurs were walking around. Pretty close. But just to put to put it in perspective, we're one of the top, if not the top seller of Telemark boots in the world now at the Freeheel Life shop stuff. And we have such little communication with Crispy and Scott, and someone just barely connected me with those people after 20 years of doing this. So I feel your pain out there, because people are like, oh, no one listens to us. And I'm like, hey, we do this full time, and we don't even know who to talk to, not even they're not listening to us. So I don't want to drag that one out too long, but I know Scarpa, for instance, does listen, and they are listening to the people. Now, with that said, there's a lot of times where what you think Telemark should make next, and I'm just going to say it, a lot of people think we need this super lightweight backcountry boot, and the market just doesn't necessarily say that. in a lot of cases. I don't think it doesn't need to be there. I think it'd be great to have a little bit lighter boot, but I think we need some upgrades, because like this kind of stuff, these are fantastic boots. But yeah, it would be really cool to see, an updated version, different materials or whatnot, but they're all really great boots. Only other thing, kind of before we move on from that, is I know Craig and I have talked. If you don't watch our YouTube channel, Craig, or Instagram TV, Craig does a thing every week called Dostie's View. And I know he's going to actually, we've talked about doing something where we open up literally a direct line, because the guys at Scarpa have come to us and said, hey, why don't you open it up to your audience and ask them exactly what they need? So I think we're making progress, you guys. And I think keep an eye out for Dostie doing a Dostie's View about this, where you can leave more comments. You can email us. We do have a direct line there and share a lot of information with them about, hey, here's what we think we need. So
yeah, let me add,
keep
I'll add something on the backcountry perspective. And I think part of the problem is that the people who are involved in the development of Telemark boots have been involved since the dinosaur era, like me. Okay. So their historical perspective on Telemark is that it's a backcountry tool. And so almost all Telemark boots, the exception was the TX Comp or the T-Race. And even the T-Race had a walk mode for a while, and then they got rid of it. And I think it's part of their historical perspective, and it's hard for them to separate that and realize that there's people out there who actually don't care about walk mode. In which case, what exists is plenty good enough right now. Okay, there's nothing wrong with the TX Pro. In fact, the only thing, honestly, to me, that is missing is a TX, for those of us who don't want a TX Pro. And from the backcountry perspective, all I want is greater walk mode range of motion. And even in that, I recognize that as long as I'm going uphill and I'm not on the flats, I don't need a whole lot more. Okay, maybe 5 degrees more than what I've got right now. And perhaps more important than that range of motion is the flex resistance. Can I move my ankle easily, or is there a fair amount of resistance? And that the resistance actually is usually not the shell, it's the liner. So so there's a lot of things that go into that. And would I like a lighter boot? Sure, absolutely, I would love a lighter boot. I don't know that it's realistic to go lighter without compromising the flex of the sole. So I think the flex of the sole is super important. I mean, to me, that's why a lot of people are adamant that it's 75 millimeter or die. Well, you know what? I can appreciate your perspective, because the natural flex of a 75 millimeter boot is wonderful. Okay. And the problem with NTN is there's this discontinuity at the second heel, and not all boots. Let's put it this way. I think Scarpa's done a really good job of making that discontinuity almost invisible or imperceptible, but it's definitely noticeable with a Crispy, at least the ones that I've tried, and it's definitely noticeable with a Scott. And so that's an argument for 75 millimeter, but it's also an argument towards those who are actually working to improve the boot, that if they're going to put all their eggs in the NTN basket, then I think they need to match that smooth flex of 75 millimeter while allowing the NTN connection. And I think there's a fair amount of work to be done there.
Yeah. Only thing I'm going to add on this is, a lot of times we talk, and this is maybe is a little more NTN-ish, but sooner than later, we're just, NTN is going to go away and 75 millimeters is going to go away, in the sense that most likely it's going to be NTN platform and we just call it a Telemark binding. I mean, that's the simple thing. And the other thing, you being here tonight, it's incredible. Like, the fact that you guys are here listening to this, I just want to emphasize, like, we've been able to make enough of a dent that people are listening now. And we want to do more of this stuff, because those people are asking us questions because they know that we can talk to you guys. And that's awesome, because again, we got to build it from the inside out and brick by brick. So Kate, do you have another question for us from the forum?
Thank you guys. That was awesome. Let me jump in with another one here that takes us in a slightly different direction, but not really. So from Psycho Pat in the forum, I'd like to discuss the fact that every tele skier I know is also a legit homegrown ski tech due to our progression through the gear. And I'd like to discuss how the new norms seem to make home repair less accessible, how the over-engineering is slowly making our gear weaker and less compatible with each part of the whole instead of truly being a norm. Having been in your guys' shop and watching the techs at work, I marvel at everyone who can do this stuff at home. So take it away. Everyone's a homegrown ski tech, but it's getting harder with the gear.
I agree to some extent. It really just depends on the gear. I like when you get to Majo, I agree that now some of the new tech bindings, I guess it's actually, I'm just trying to rack my brain, because really when we talk ski teching, it usually comes down to bindings, not boots or skis. And I'm kind of biting my tongue because I kind of picked on Majo right off the bat because it's got so many parts, but I agree in the sense, like, if you come, and a lot of these questions I think come from, and I'm speculating here, but you know, I started on gear in the 90s, and if I compare the 90s to now, yeah, everything's way more complicated. You know, like when I ski a 3-pin and a leather, I'm like, yeah, no problem. There's nothing to fix on this thing. You know, like I could break the toe bail. Rotofella Free Ride, Majo, they're hard. And I'll tell you, one of the, just side note, and I want to hear Craig's take on this, but one thing that when I opened the Freeheel Life shop here in Salt Lake, one thing we really wanted to do was make sure you had a parts room for the binding. So we actually have a whole room where we break down all of the parts, and then we have almost 400 parts cataloged all the way back to the 80s, 90s, probably 80s, back to like Super Loop era. Accessibility to parts is probably one of the #1 problems. And that goes for even mounting screws. So I'd say I agree, more complicated. Do I see it changing? I think 22 Designs is the best example of super industrial design that's simple. And I want to say fair, it's not easy to fix some of the stuff, but fair, almost everything's easy to fix unless you break more catastrophic stuff. So
I would say with this new stuff, the clear exception to being less durable is TTS, because TTS is so simple. And we've been using heel cables for 40 years. It's proven technology. It just goes and goes and goes and goes. Okay. The obvious exception was NTN when it was introduced by Rotofella. And a big part of the weakness of what Rotofella developed is they created bindings that had a ton of cavities that snow would pack into. And when you've got snow in there and you've got the forces of Telemark and the repeated over and over and over, things break. Okay. And Majo was an example where in an attempt to go lighter weight, Pierre used a lot of plastic. And the reality is version 1 had a lot of problems with plastic breaking. And then he beefed some things up in version 2, and And then he'd make an improvement, and every time he made an improvement, this is my experience, and it's not totally true, but in general, Pierre has not skied in America enough to realize that we get snow conditions such that snow packs, and if there's any weakness in a product, it will be found. 100%. I mean, I can't so he changed the heel post so that he has a low climbing wire, and he also changed the spring box so that you don't have to lift it up on the kickstand to step in. You can do a flat step in. Okay, great. So, and I look at that in a very, I just look at it in a cursory way on the bench, and I go, perfect, this will work. May not work for me because I like flat tour mode, but for most people, it'll probably be acceptable. I finally got out last week and used it. And it was just the simplest thing. You would think, okay, so what's so hard about making a climbing wire that's lower so that I won't quite have flat tour mode, but it'll be really relatively low, and actually it'd be really good for a lot of mellow angle skin tracks. Well, that would be great, except that when you're following an existing skin track, a lot of times it gets packed and gets polished, and you end up having to stomp. Well, when I stomped to hold, the wire bent. Okay, so the problem there was, I can't say exactly, but I'm just going to say either it wasn't large enough gauge wire, or he didn't overbend it so that it couldn't come out. But the reality is, something that simple was a problem. Okay, so I think there's a tenant, because we're going down a new path with NTN, especially with tech toes and an NTN connection. We're running into things that the designers have not fully accounted for. Whereas with 75 millimeter, we had decades of evidence of kind of what works and what doesn't. And the beauty of 75 millimeter tends to be its simplicity.
Okay, kind of moving from, stick it out, being the homegrown telly guy. I appreciate that. One guy, actually, let me see who that is. Mark, we need you guys on the East Coast presence like you've done in the Midwest. Make some connection with the East Coast telly shops that you can coordinate for equipment and rentals. And he's referring to the Freeheel Life shop. 100%. I mean, that's why we did the beta test up in the Midwest. Putting a certified tech somewhere is not as hard, but putting the rentals and demos is super expensive. It went well this year up in the Midwest. I know we're really trying to analyze how to maintain it, because, at the end of the day, it's a business and we got to make sure how to make it work. But I mean, I'll say it right here. The biggest opportunity for Telemark in the United States, and I'll even throw Canada in there, is, I mean, West Coast got a lot of stuff, Rockies, West Coast, but man, Midwest and East Coast, where the mountains aren't as big and you're looking for something fresh, huge opportunity. So we're definitely, it's on the radar. So we're always trying to figure some stuff out.
Here's a good question. Talk about waxing and its effect on the base adhesive of skins. A year ago, I had the opportunity to add DPS's Phantom permanent wax. And I can say that it definitely improved the glide without wax, compared to no wax during temperatures between 15 degrees Fahrenheit and 28. Okay. But at either end, which is where I tend to really, that's where I wanted Phantom to actually perform. Okay. Because a lot of times, especially in the spring, I'll go out and even if I wax, after I've done one run, the corn snow is so abrasive, it's wiped the wax off, right? So Phantom doesn't really do a whole lot at the extreme ends of warm and cold. If it's really cold, you're moving really slow and you wish you had a wax, a cold wax on your skis. And if it's really warm, you wish you had a warm wax on your skis. And and I've just learned that, you know what, it's worth putting a little bit of wax on, especially if I'm going touring. It doesn't need to be a lot. I don't, I mean, I should brush it. I should scrape it and brush it. But the most important thing in terms of how easily your skins come off is there's some kind of wax. If there's a wax on your base, when you go to rip the hide, the skins will come off nice and easy. If you have a dry base, you might have to take your skis off to get your skins off. And then it's also possible that if your glue is contaminated with excess moisture, then you'll be leaving behind pieces of glue. So, you know, it'd be nice if Phantom worked better, but I think the bottom line is if you're going skiing, you just got to accept that if you want optimal performance, especially taking your skins on and off, you got to wax your skis. You can't side cut that step. I wish you could, but you can't.
All right, Dostie, we're going to go into speedier rounds. You ready? Otherwise, we're never going to get through all these.
All right.
You and I talk too much. That's the problem. So real quick on this one, someone asked about the skis again. Listen to the podcast. Says, is there going to be a right and left specific ski for the Freeheel Life skis? Nope. Regular skis. Shout out to Bobby Too Slow. Glad you're here, man. I owe you a podcast. So the Michael bolt-on duck butt will get its day. All I'll say is that.
And it totally deserves it.
100%. All you, if some of you are on here are DIY binding and boot modifiers, we're going to make some space for you because it's awesome what you guys are doing. And I love it. I mean, that's the spirit of how we're going to build this thing. One guy said, tried touring on hammerheads, having to move the pins back and forth to tour. I did that for 5 years before going to Outlaws. I'm glad you found that.
Yeah. I remember when Russell came out with a hammerhead and I skied it and I was like, wow, this is amazing. And it's easy to adjust and all that stuff. And Russell and I had been talking while he was developing and I was really disappointed. I said, Russell, where's the free pivot? Oh, you don't need it. It's really easy. You can just change this and do that. And it's a lot less resistance. And I was like, dude, no. I mean, zero resistance.
I know, it's funny.
You know, it took 10 years for Chris and Collins to develop the axle. So that was not a trivial change in the design. But thankfully, they were able to maintain the performance of the hammerhead and give it a free pivot as well. That's really awesome.
My favorite comment so far, Ned Ryerson is the guy from Groundhog Day movie, which is totally true. Look up Ned Ryerson.
I like my favorite comment here is Pierre in the room? No, he's not. Not that we're aware. Okay. I mean, he might have snuck in. Who knows?
Yeah, one thing I've thought of that we may put together, and I've talked to Pierre and Chris from 22 Designs, is I thought, and message us and let us know if you guys think this is interesting, or if you guys have ideas for guests, you know, for various, I mean, we've got this platform now, so we can do some cool stuff. I've thought about doing like a binding roundtable and drumming up all these characters into one room and see if we can get them to talk about stuff, which I thought would be cool.
Hey, one more question here, because this is common. Can we speak to the transition between 75 and NTN? What's what's the learning curve, expected differences? Because he's coming from T2s and G3 ascents. So the G3 ascent is like a Targa. It's a very, well, what we tend to call neutral. I mean, it's not that neutral. It's not as neutral as a 3-pin, but there's not a whole lot of extra power added by the cable. It's kind of like a switchback, only with a lift kit. It's way high above the ski. But here's the thing: when you're coming from 75 millimeter, and Josh, please jump in and give me your perspective. This is just mine. You're used to being able to lift your heel, and the tension in the cable doesn't kick in right away. So it allows a certain style to develop, and a lot of people get comfortable with it. But with NTN, that tension is coming off the middle of the boot, and in general, way sooner, especially with the Mejo, with the Outlaw, and with the current incarnation of Lynx. The engagement is immediate. Like I can remember talking about how the axle had immediate engagement. Well, compared to the Outlaw, the engagement of the axle is slow. So you have to be prepared for that tension turning on quicker. And that means you're going to have to adjust your stance to account for that, or it's just going to throw you.
Yeah. So basically when I opened the shop here in 2014, and probably we didn't carry boots the first year, which is crazy to think now, but one of the things that I really wanted to do, and it's funny because I actually told a rep, we don't work with a lot of reps here, honestly, just because the reps actually don't know a lot about tele either, going back to that conversation. But I remember I told him my method of trying to take people from 75 to NTN, and he just looked at me, he's like, that's way too complicated. And what it was is the method when we sell NTN here, first off, the first thing we say is, what are you skiing on? Because what we don't want to do as a retailer is change your style. That's the most important thing with Telemark is everyone has to learn it. You got to pay a lot of dues. You got to, and you might be on Targa Ascents, or you might be, I mean, now it's crazy because, a lot of people are starting on NTN. So if you were to go reverse engineer, it'd be totally crazy. But the biggest thing from my perspective is when you're on 75 millimeter, the goal, you're not trying to go to NTN, like there's some conversion that you have to make. But I will say, if you don't have somebody that can assist you in utilizing NTN to match where you're at in 75 millimeter, you're probably going to hate it. And for the simple fact that the way, kind of the stuff Craig's talking about, the activation point of your foot as you drop your knee, and spring tensions, torsional rigidity, because you don't have the twist of a cable any longer. They're all things that, first off, are not bad. Just if you ever go into another shop, you'll never hear this here at the Freeheel Life shop, or us writing about this on telemarkskier.com. We don't want to change people's style. We want to have equipment that helps you maintain your style and what you've achieved in the turn and keep it going forward. Now, the only thing I'll say with that, those are the differences. And there's a really good, for this, for Rope Gun that sent this question in, go back and listen to the podcast 75 millimeter versus NTN. And this is a super common topic. And especially if you're coming from G3s, NTN's going to be a big jump. And I think the only thing we're missing in equipment right now is, quite honestly, not enough boot and binding combinations. That's it. Because the more NTN boots and more NTN bindings, the more ability to mix and match and find what you need. Spill the beans, boys. They want us talking. That's hilarious. We don't know anything. What are you talking about?
We gave some good hints. And the reality is, I think the key is getting the manufacturers to hear you. And what I've learned over the years is when something is public, people respond. When you try and give private advice, hey, let me just tell you something, Josh. It isn't necessarily heard, but when it's public, and so with you guys asking these questions, and they feel the public pressure. Okay, so and when we saw Mopow's question, it just feels like no one's listening. Man, we all looked at your question and went, wow, was that dude in here talking to us? Because that's kind of how we feel, like nobody's listening to us. So
we had a bunch more. That was awesome, you guys. We had a bunch more questions in the Q&A that we're hiding. So I'm going to save these for the forum topics. Dostie, I think it'd be awesome if you tackled some of these in articles as well. So folks, if you put your question in the Q&A and the guys didn't see it yet, we'll definitely be sure to tackle some of these as well. But I did have one. Somebody's curious how old you guys are. Aside from as old as dirt and as old as dinosaurs, would you like to answer?
I saw Dostie, they said you're from Jurassic era, so that's pretty cool.
I thought it was Paleolithic, but that's okay. Yeah, I'll take Jurassic. No, but so, and let me throw something out for the guy who's considering the switch from 75 millimeter to NTN. All right. I'm 64. I'm skiing better now than I was 10 years ago. And it's not because I'm 10 years older. It's because the gear is better. And I'm skiing on NTN. And do I love the flex of 75 millimeter? Absolutely. Have I been able to more or less make that the same? No, but the difference, the change to me is worth an adjustment because, like I said, I'm skiing better. And it's not because I've got 10 more years experience on this earth. It's because it's better gear.
And I guess to the age was the question. That's funny. Yeah, so I'm 42 and yeah, I've been Telemark skiing since 93. And I agree with Craig. I mean, it's funny because I think obviously I do this for a living and I'm super fortunate, and it's all because of all of you out there that we're even operating on these things. But it's very funny to me that people think Telemark's dead in any capacity, because this is literally the best time of all the history of Telemark in terms of the gear. The gear is so good and it's so easy to learn. There's no shortcuts and there's no easy way to learn it, but getting on the equipment's good now just to learn, and it's easy, not easy to find. And obviously these are topics. I'm seeing all these questions and I'm like, man, we could literally go for hours. But I just want to say to you, like Craig said, it does get easier with the gear we use now. But if you guys follow any of the stuff I do, I want to encourage you guys to tell you whatever gear you have. And even if you have NTN stuff or you have 75, try it all out. The perspective that you get from different gear, that's what's so cool about Telemark, is like the different gear and brands and eras of gear. They're awesome. And whether you pick it up out of a dumpster and ski it or you buy some crazy setup, I mean, it's all awesome. So
yep, it's all Tele. And I'll put in a pitch for 3 pins and leather. Josh requires his staff to experience that for a lot of different reasons. One, so that if you're someone who's been telemarking since the leather days, if you come into the shop, you'll be looking at this young kid going, well, there's no way he has any idea what I'm talking about. No, actually, they do. Okay. And yet, when I was out there a couple weeks ago, Josh, we went on a backcountry day and Josh was in leathers and 3 pins, right? And one of the younger guys asked me, he goes, why don't you do that? I went, oh, no, I got plenty of time on leather, and I am not doing that again.
I had sweet tour mode that day. I'll have to, if people look, I posted a picture for the sips and tips of that tour.
Yeah.
And it's funny because in that era, there wasn't even climbing posts. You had to use these like bungee things with like a little.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
So,
Telly
anyway.
baits came after. Yeah.
So some weird gear history for you. Let me see if there's a couple just real quick ones we can knock out.
Well, I know Ches said, hey, all I want is more range of motion. I'm with you, Ches. Just give me more range of motion. I mean, do I want lighter weight? Yeah, but just give me more range of motion and I'll be happy. And give me my TX back, because my TX is going to wear out.
Yeah, I agree with them on that. Need to sell more telly boots to get manufacturers to improve 100%. And that's from Tim. Tim, I agree 100% on that. And that's what, I mean, what we've got to do is make it so it's attractive to other retailers to carry product. And then, I mean, a lot of the problems that you guys bring up on the internet, it's crazy because, I mean, we know you're all out there from our businesses and who we talk to, but retailers don't. There's a lot of retailers that just don't carry telly and they don't really know what's going on. So yes, we need to sell more boots. Better ROM, crispy bellows. That same gentleman brought up prefer crispy bellows, wish they had a tighter fit in a small Outlaw X. I don't want to get into the problem with Outlaw X, but I agree. Crispy, we need, again, more variety. Someone brought up Fay Brothers on the East Coast. The way they are the distributors of Crispy in North America. They don't price their boots so that retailers are really incentivized to carry them. We have carried them in the past, but yeah, those guys sell a bunch of Crispy boots. And honestly, the more boots, the better. I mean, we got 3 brands, right? So the more combinations of boots and bindings, that'll help us get people to what they need to do. Let me see if there's one for. Oh yeah, you talked about the waxing. Pierre's is not in the room. That's weird. That kind of creeps me out. I don't know. Maybe he's just lingering in the comments. 22 heel wire or 22 Diaz bomber wires and good springs. Agreed. I love 22 designs. Like, I think Russell Rainey, when he started that company and what those guys have done since they took it over, Chris and Collins, it's just industrial and simple. So, NTN will punish lazy, low transitions, be more dynamic, and remember the edge is the turn. So, oh yeah, that's from your buddy Ches. So the only thing I'd say about NTN, because this is where it gets weird, right? People are like, NTN versus 75 millimeter. It's like, look, if you're telemarketing, like, honestly, the style is different. I'll tell you, I skied low when I was younger, and the gear, I'm skiing Revo 1 and 2 bindings. You're low smoke. We call them low smokers. Needed to ski. It felt rad. As a young kid, I was like, this is sick. I'm telemarketing. I don't think it's lazy. I think it's style, but I don't think it's necessarily efficient, but who am I to judge? So that's kind of how I feel on that.
Yeah, rapid engagement of a binding, is it detrimental in deep powder? It can be. So if the binding engages quickly and that puts a lot of pressure on the tip, that is going to cause the ski to dive in powder. So if your binding engages that fast and has enough power in the tip, you have to shift your weight back. Otherwise, the tip will dig in. Now, here's one of the advantages, I believe, of NTN, the second heel connection versus the real heel connection, is that extra power does not all go to the tip with an NTN connection, but it does with a real heel connection. So you've got to, I know when I first started skiing TTS, I had to really sit back, or I would, my tips would go down and I'd be doing a cartwheel turn. Okay. So I had to learn how to sit back. Once I learned how to sit back, and then I went to some, and then like when the Meijo came out in the Lynx, I'd already made that adaptation. So, and then I noticed that with an NTN connection, my tips did not die, but I'd already adjusted my style. So I was sitting back for it.
One person that I haven't answered a question yet. Colette asked, how many truly new people Telly are you seeing these days? I don't know a number. None of us do. I think we're getting to a point where we're actually putting a survey together to put out via telemarkskier.com and the Freeheel Life shop, because I think we can get a really start getting accurate numbers. And this kind of goes back like to the industry talk and everything we're always talking about with that is there's a lot of nobody knows. And it's hard to make gear for people when you don't actually know how many are out there, where they shop, and how many new people are getting in. And we need to start getting that. So to answer your question, we don't know. I'd say locally in Salt Lake, I mean, we grow an enormous amount at the Freeheel Life shop, and hopefully telemarkskier.com, hopefully we can connect with as many people as we have on our social media platforms. That's what means so much to me, to all of you that are here and subscribing to the online magazine and helping us get that going again. Is for as long as Telly's been around, we got a lot of work to do to get it where it's a thing. And I think it's, as sad as it is, it's like a lot of the problems, I don't want to call them problems, but the issues that we're trying to overcome are really difficult because we don't have any information, because there's no industry. So we got to, these are really good questions. I think that's an awesome one that you brought that up. Solid Telly community in Japan. Yep, absolutely. And Kurt says, where I live, seeing a Telly skier in the backcountry is seeing a unicorn. So it's not as common. It's probably Dostie out there walking around. Just on that note, Dostie and I, obviously, I think one of the cool things with our relationship, like I learned in a resort when I was 14 by default of I was 14 years old in the 90s. No one was like, hey, Madsen, here's a beacon. Like, go take those, Europa 99s and your leather boots out in the backcountry. I didn't know any better. I literally was reading a book in the resort, and Dostie came at it more from a backcountry perspective. But I'll tell you, one of the most important things is if we're going to grow, like Colette was asking, how many new participants every year, we've got to have people have, one, the ability to get equipment, and then two, they need to be able to be near, well, I shouldn't say they don't have to be near to a resort, but I think it's more common, like if you have a rental and you can go try it, and you can find an inexpensive lesson or a tutorial or whatever it may be. This is what is going to grow Telemark. So teaching youth, teaching people of all ages. I mean, that's the coolest thing, is we can grow this together, but we have to solve real life problems, which is it's hard to find equipment. And then once we actually get people on the hill, it's probably a lot in the resort, despite what everybody says, like, you got to make a backcountry boot. And, here I am, I'm like, here's a good boot. I mean, we could get literally tens of thousands of people skiing on this boot. And again, I'm not saying don't change the boot. You guys are probably all freaking out. Like, oh my God, he's saying don't change the boot. but you know, we've got to progressively do stuff. So resort skiing, access to gear, access to, you know,
No, I mean, I'm
questions.
sure, I'm sure when you learned at a resort. I didn't learn in the backcountry. I was a backcountry skier, but I didn't go in the backcountry until I figured out how to make the turn inbounds. I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't dare go out of bounds until I knew what that, I didn't want to, you know, hike all the way up and then flounder all the way down. So it took me a year and a half of, I would telemark in the morning until my legs gave out, and then I'd switch to alpine, finish the day out. And it wasn't until Christmas '87, Buddy and I went to Mount Bachelor, and in 4 days, we were able to stay Freeheel all day. And so when we were driving home, we lived in Southern California at the time. We ended up going to Lassen for New Year's Eve, and I remember just wondering, what should I do? We were gonna camp in a tent, celebrate New Year's Eve, and then climb to the summit and then ski. And they had 2 feet of fresh, and so I was concerned that I was gonna waste my efforts with a Freeheel. But my buddy convinced me, no, you can do it. You're good enough. So we did. We went, and man, 2,500 feet. That hook was set. 2 feet of fresh, making telly turns all the way down. Oh my gosh, I have not. I mean, I've alpined since then on occasion, a day here, a day there, but I've not switched back. I've stuck with telly ever since.
I love that one. This is a really good question that just popped in, and we'll kind of start winding down here, you guys, but there are some really good questions here. You've all asked anything we can do to promote telemark instruction at resorts. So I can tell you from my experiences what I've seen over the years. And first off, awesome question, because if you don't have instruction to learn, I always tell people, people are like, how do you grow telemark and how do you do this? And, first off, no one's going to have some massive marketing campaign and do all these flashy things to get people into telemark. I'll tell you, the best thing to get people into telemark, seeing another telemark skier, and especially a good one. But the right people, when they see that, are going to be thinking, hey, that looks really cool. I'd like to try that. And so then here begins the cycle. And I'll show you where it's broken, at least in my experience. And it's pretty, not just here in Utah, like everywhere in the United States that I've seen. Someone sees awesome telemark skier, thinks, I want a telemark ski. They go, where can I get that gear and rent it? Nowhere. Goes back to the retail problem. So and there's no rentals at the resorts in most places. There's a couple places here and there. When you talk about instruction, here's what is the most frustrating part about how things are set up in the United States is ski schools, generally speaking, are owned by the mountain or the resort, okay? And they dictate whether they're going to do lessons or certain pricing or whatnot. So let me just give you a quick example to answer this question. When I opened the shop here in 2014, I started doing rentals right off the bat, and they weren't that good of rentals. We literally spray painted skis and put a sticker on them that said Freeheel Life, and we mounted them up. And we're like, here's your rental for $20. Because I thought, nobody can get rentals, so they're not learning to telly. Well, everyone would come in and rent, and then they would get to the resort and they would ask for a lesson, and there was no group lesson pricing for telemark because it was not all private half days. So people are paying like $300 for instruction for a half day lesson. And typically this is how it's going. And even when we've tried to do clinics at various resorts, generally you get kicked over from the marketing people because you're like, oh, I'm bringing telemark to your mountain. And you're like, we want to do a clinic. And basically what happens, they'll kick you to ski school. Ski school says, you're going to have to pay our instructors to do it. And it just kind of dead ends there. So even if we solve the gear problem, I agree with Yuval, super difficult right now in the US to get instruction at that level. And people, you know, sometimes I'm not the biggest fan of PSIA, and I know that's separate of the ski school, but there's some really good people that are passionate telemarketers in there, but there's just a lot of all that stuff kind of gets mixed up. So if you're PSIA, I still love you. I know you're passionate about it, but we'll do a couple more and then we'll wrap this up. Another one that came up was Jason asked, anyone know if World Cup Telemark will come to the Olympics? Highly doubtful, at least from what I know of it. Funny enough, in 2000 to 2002, I tried to be a World Cup. I did one World Cup race, to my credit. I was terrible. I don't even know why they let me in that level of racing. There is an amazing World Cup circuit of telemark racing, especially in Europe. And we have some really great US World Cup telemark skiers. I know what the old reasons, they've been trying to get this in the Olympics for over 20 years. And they just haven't had any success. So, and it's not because the athleticism's not there. I mean, it's amazing. I actually interviewed Jasmine Taylor. She's a British World Cup telemark skier on the podcast. And I mean, it's too bad that we don't have anything above and beyond that, but I don't know the total reasons, but I don't think it's going to get there, but maybe, I don't know. We might be stuck with watching curling. And,
well, I don't think it's important that it get into the Olympics. It would be nice, but the reality is it doesn't get to the Olympics until it's popular or unless it has some historical precedent. I mean, you know, running the luge is not a popular activity, but it's in the Olympics because historically it's been there forever.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's I think generally that question pops up with if people think, and this goes back to my philosophy we talked about with building industry. I'm not saying it wouldn't be cool to see them in the Olympics, but if your thinking is, hey, if we made it in the Olympics or we make it into the X Games, or, you know, people are thinking if we expose more people in kind of crossover, that somehow it's going to be telemark's really just going to become this huge thing. I mean, that's a rabbit hole in and of itself. I mean, I literally could talk for hours about why I haven't seen that work, because there are actually a lot of examples, but yeah, even if it was in the Olympics, I agree. It would probably be like, how many bobsledders do you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And here's the other thing. There's a tendency. I remember when I started Coolr, I was like, man, it'd be so cool if we could get some video clips of Warren Miller would cover what's going on in the backcountry and this and that. Well, he did, but he never covered Coolr. But the thing is, nowadays, just what we're doing right now, okay? Video is available to everyone on a worldwide basis. So really, it's just a matter of us sharing it. And so someone doesn't have to be limited to seeing it at a resort. It's possible to see what's going on with Tele on your phone through videos that are shared.
Yeah. I should have read Bonsai's comment that says, if Tele goes Olympics, I'm buying stock in Freeheel Life.
If Tele goes Olympic, Josh will sell stock.
Yeah, I'm all about it. Let me just find the last one. People are kind of answering
whatever
that question.
Happened to Dickie Hall and Telemark NATO.
That's what I was going to have you talk about.
Dickie retired. He put on the 40th Telemark festival. When was that? I think it was 2016, maybe 2015. Anyway, once he was done with that, he said, you know, I'm done. I spoke to him the other day. He may have retired from the public sphere, but he has not retired from telemark skiing. He's got 100 days in already this season. And not one of them was at a resort. So good for him.
And for those of you who are wondering, I know some people have hit me up about having him on the podcast. It's in the works. And funny enough, Dostie, I was surprised he talked to him the other day. I texted him probably in December, and classic, well, I want to say classic Dickie Hall, like in my mind, because that guy's like a legend to me, you know. And he's like, "Hey, can't do the podcast. I'm going on the black powder rifle hunt on my skis. See you later." I was like, man, that guy is a legend. I want to be like that when I grow up.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
he's still skiing hard, and he makes me look young.
yeah, no, that's awesome. And yeah, just I think to wrap it up, a lot of people were talking about NET, which was New England Telemark NATO festivals going away. Super bummer because those guys were holding it down on the East Coast. Dylan, I see your comment about Frigo Life Summit and Festival. It's on the brain, brother, for sure. And I think that's definitely one of those pieces that we used to have the Freeheel Life Cup up in Targhee, but yeah, I think you'll probably see that in the next couple of years is us doing a little gathering in Utah. Now we got the shop, we got Telemark Skier back up and running, and it's a good time to bring that back. So I think that's probably a great place for us to kind of wrap. Anything else you want to talk about, Dostie?
No, I think, thank you all for joining in and throwing out your questions. They're awesome questions. I mean, they're things that we try and deal with on a regular basis in articles and podcasts and stuff like that. But on the other hand, you know, this is an opportunity for us to all kind of be in the same room, so to speak. And it's really cool. I'm very encouraged and psyched, and thank you all for attending, and we look forward to the next one.
Yeah, thank you. It's so cool to see you guys all chiming in and asking questions, and we appreciate it so much. And I just want you guys to know that you're all a part of something. And yeah, I think this is a good first go. And I know this is probably pretty general. We could probably get super specific on topics. So thanks for playing along with us so we could see if it works and hopefully use it for some other stuff. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate you.